Hello and welcome to the NYU Game Center. I am Eric Zimmerman. I'm one of the full-time faculty, and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, Lili Ibrahim, I want to thank our sponsors for the event series at the NYU Game Center, that is Take-Two Interactive and the Empire State Development Fund. Let's thank them for helping us put on events like this tonight. Thank you very much to our sponsors. And also, we have a few more events coming up this semester. You may have seen them displayed here on the screen while you were sitting and waiting, but Chris Plant, games journalist, is going to be visiting us in about 3 weeks on April 23rd. He will be here in the evening, and we're really looking forward to that talk. And then, of course, there is our end of the year showcase happening on May 13th, always a major event in the New York City game scene. And we really hope to have all of you there for what's always an incredible party and celebration of all of the amazing work that goes on here at the NYU Game Center. And part of what we do at the NYU Game Center is bring in incredible scholars and game makers to talk about their work. And that is exactly what's happening tonight. Lili Ibrahim is here, and I could not be more thrilled that Lili is coming to share her ideas, her point of view, and her work with all of us tonight. Lili comes from a pretty interesting pedigree in games before she landed her current job, where she is art director at Us2 Games, who are most well known for the Monument Valley series, and Lili has been art director on the recent iterations of Monument Valley. But Lili started as an illustrator, and she worked on Netrunner game series, doing a lot of illustrations for them. She's moved on to titles like the Pokemon Art Academy series when she was working for Headstrong Games, and working at Chucklefish, she worked on the Starbound game series as well, among other games. I think this is such an interesting collection of titles, because to me, like, even thinking about those games that I mentioned, and they're just a little sampling of all the titles that Lili has worked on, it kind of represents how incredibly well-rounded she is as a game maker. I mean, the Netrunner is a game that is known for its incredible sense of style. It was kind of part of the sort of second wave of cyberpunk becoming stylish again, and it does so much work with those illustrations in world building and creating a vibe and a kind of emotional and narrative space for the players as they're taking part in the strategic game. The Pokemon Art Academy series is all about players actually just drawing Pokemon, and so I just think that it's so interesting that Lili was part of this project, where it's all about empowering players to be creative and really blurring the line between, you know, making media and playing around with media. And of course, the Starbound series, something totally different that has to do with procedural systems and kind of nerdy tinkering and exploring these worlds that are different every time that you play. And, you know, Lili really wraps her whole creative self around this whole range of things. Like I said, from world building, player expression, understanding systems so deeply. I met Lili a little over a year ago at Games for Change Istanbul, where she was talking about yet another aspect of her career. The game Alba that Us2 created had a whole component that had to do with planting trees and recognizing the kind of environmental and social impact of making games, and how the game industry can help raise awareness in that aspect too. So Lili is not only kind of deeply skilled and deeply invested in all these ways of making games, but she also has such a strong sense and understanding of the cultural aspect of games and the social impact of games. And she's also just an incredibly lovely and delightful and brilliant designer. So I could go on and sing her praises further, but you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to her. So please join me in welcoming the amazing Lili Ibrahim.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Eric, for the introduction of my career, probably. That was a really intimidating introduction. I feel intimidated by this person who's coming up to speak, and I just want to reassure you that I am just a humble game maker like yourselves. And I have prepared some really exciting slides for you, specifically for you because you are, like me, game makers and you are versed in the vocabulary of making games. So I have gone really in depth with the material I'm going to share with you, more so than I have ever before in any of my talks. So I'm excited. I hope that the information is interesting to you. So I will be talking to you about Monument Valley and making Monument Valley today. Who has played Monument Valley? Actually, who has not played Monument Valley? Okay, that's good. That's also good to know. So these are the 3 Monument Valley titles that are out in the wild. The original Monument Valley 1 came out in 2014. That is quite a while ago. Monument Valley 2 came out in 2017. And then the most recent installment, Monument Valley 3, which I art directed, came out in 2025, end of. So it's really quite recent. They're all nowadays available on all platforms, I believe. But 1 and 2 were specifically developed just for mobile devices. And if you don't know Monument Valley, which some of you don't, which is okay, I guess, I will just briefly explain it as it is a atmospheric puzzle game where you travel through mysterious architecture and optical illusions to unravel this sort of story and character motivations. That's all I'm going to give you. You just really have to play it yourselves. And the original Monument Valley did quite well, and it is due to the success of it that we as a studio have the flexibility to experiment with different things, which has allowed us to try different creative expressions and experiment. And most recently, as Eric mentioned, we also make sure that we try to feed back into the real world with the work that we do. And we, I think, have a lot to thank the original Monument Valley for that sort of flexibility. So before I start digging into Monument Valley, let me introduce myself. I mean, do I have to after that introduction? I don't know, but my name is Lili Ibrahim. Here are some of the things I've worked on. I am Swedish. I moved to London in 2009 to study illustration and animation at Kingston University. And since then, I have worked as an illustrator on Netrunner, some other board games, some other book illustrations, and then I entered the games industry and worked on a number of things, mostly for smaller indie studios. And in 2020, I guess, the first week of the pandemic lockdown in London, I started working for Us2 Games. And I have been there ever since as their lead artist, one of the lead artists. Us2 Games is based in London, which is where I flew in from a few days ago. And we are a small indie game studio in South London. And we love to make games that we believe present the sort of human side of the human emotional experience, and we like to connect with people in that way. So we used to say that we make games for everyone because we want everyone to be able to relate and connect with the stuff that we do. Some ground rules. This sounds scary, but it's not scary, I promise. But part of this chat today I'm going to have with you is going to be some really quite nitty-gritty detail of how some of the levels and chapters in Monument Valley were made. And to really bring you on that journey, I want to first share with you some sort of basics of Monument Valley creation. So the sort of ground rules to get you to really appreciate the deeper details I will share with you now. Monument Valley is famous for its seamless combination of design and art. So if I had to break down the 2 pillars of Monument Valley, it would be tactile interaction and beautiful art. And in terms of the tactile interaction, as most of you know, the input in Monument Valley is quite simple. There is not that much stuff that you can do, which is part of the elegance in its design. You can rotate things, pieces of architecture, like such, and you can hold and drag pieces to move things around. It's really quite like one-to-one feedback. And you can tap on paths to move the character across. These are the three things, more or less, that you can do. And it's really tactile, it's really playful. We try to set it up in a way that is satisfying. You might want to drag it back and forth, you might want to rotate it for a while, and we want it to feel pleasurable to the user. On the visual side of things, which in my opinion is the most important side of things, I shouldn't say that because this is recorded, but when I started working for Us2 Games and when I stepped into this role as lead artist for Monument Valley 3, I was told that the pedigree of Monument Valley means that every screenshot should be a printable work of art, which is really big boots to fill. But it really is the sort of philosophy of the visuals of this IP. And a lot of it comes from the sort of roots of the Monument Valley IP and how it began, which was from, so Us2 Games is a game studio, but at the beginning, Us2 Games was part of a design agency called Us2. And some people from Us2 decided to make this game. So a lot of the sensibilities came from graphic design and visual communication from the design world. And from that came, Monument Valley was created. So there were a lot of graphic design sensibilities in the sort of, fabric of that first title. And you can see that in the screenshots here. I have chosen some of my favorites. I think that they look really beautiful. The silhouettes and the colors and the shape language lends itself really well as a work of art in itself. We work a lot with silhouette. We work with color, and we try to combine it to create really striking imagery. So now that I've shared some of the two pillars, the tactile interaction and the printable work of art, I guess I really need to admit that despite the fact that I said that the visuals are the most important part of Monument Valley, I think that what people actually remember about Monument Valley is when the sort of the interaction, the satisfying interaction and the graphic visuals come together and they sort of form these optical illusions, which are incredibly mind-bending and satisfying to look at. And this is the one of the pillars of the IP. And I'm going to share a very brief masterclass of optical illusions in Monument Valley. The main thing you have to remember when it comes to optical illusion is this shape. This is the Penrose triangle, and it is a physically impossible triangle that loops in on itself. It works a little bit like these sort of anamorphic sculptures where from one angle you see a shape and from all other angles it kind of breaks. So for us, that is the case for the Penrose triangle. It is a seamless shape from a specific angle, and if you rotate it, it breaks. And this is the bread and butter of Monument Valley optical illusion, is this specific shape and this specific interaction. This sort of rotation or movement of pieces that then form or click into place and form this impossible shape. It's a very satisfying experience. And so next time you play Monument Valley, as you play through the puzzles, you will definitely notice that most of the sort of weird feeling buildings and optical illusions are different takes on this Penrose triangle. So here's a level from Monument Valley 2 where Mother is walking on a path that impossibly connects to a door at the top. And you can see how the video on the left shows it's rotating the scene in Unity. And our very clever programmers have created these tools that lets the character walk seamlessly across and lets us just create these sort of impossible architectural structures. These are tools that we've made and are made just for us. So there is definitely like an aspect of having to onboard to how to make optical illusions using these tools. Anyone who onboards will spend at least a month just learning how to do this on the job. So that's the ground rules. Monument Valley 3 started in beginning of 2022. This is the leads group that I worked with back then. And we set out to create the next installment in the title. And I'm just going to briefly just talk about what we set out to do. As a group, we decided that we wanted the third installment to be about these pillars: community, migration, and climate. So a lot of the narrative and a lot of the visual treatments try to feed into these sort of categories of work. From a visual point of view, I wanted to inject the IP with some fresh visuals. And considering that Monument Valley, the original, was based on graphic design of its time, I mean, how long had it been? It's like 2014 till 20, I can't do the maths, 8 years? 8 years, yeah. So 8 years later, I was really curious about, is there a way to make another Monument Valley that gives the same impact of like, wow, this is fresh graphic design. And so I was looking at what graphic design looks like maybe since 2014. And considering the sort of themes that we'll be looking at, climate, community, migration, we started talking about this this narrative of maybe like city versus nature, or like the clash of those two worlds. And I was looking at poster design that showed maybe a friction between two worlds of some sort. And I really liked this these visuals of these soft organic shapes against maybe something more angular. And I also liked how these soft shapes are sort of 2D flat against maybe something more three-dimensional. And then the other thing I explored early on was this idea of breaking architecture apart. So Monument Valley, as we know it, it includes a lot of very tall buildings. And at the start of the project, we replayed these games over and over and over again. And in the end, maybe there was a part of me that just wanted to sort of anyway, so, and the first image here actually is from a really cool artist, Cornelia Parker, who she had an exhibit at Tate Modern around the time of me starting this sort of research. And this is also one of the reasons I encourage everyone to see what's out there in the art world. Whenever you work on something, you never know what's going to spark something. So Cornelia Parker had this exhibit at Tate Modern back then in 2022, and she had this one piece in one room called Exploding Shed. And it was a shed that had been exploded, and then every piece of that shed was hung in midair, a little bit like this one here. And I just walked around it, and I was like, yeah, this is connecting with me in some way. It's just like city versus nature, and what is nature going to do to the city, and what can we do to all these towers? Like, Monument Valley is all about climbing these towers over and over again, and like I just wanted to see something like this happening. So I went back and did a little bit of research and started thinking about taking buildings apart in different ways. So these two mood boards are going to come back. That's why I'm showing you these now. But yeah, check out your local galleries as well. So how we work, this is just one slide, I think. this is a diagram of how we work. Photorealistic. On the left, you see the whole team. That's everyone. We ideate and come up with so many different ideas. Like you would start the day just opening Unity, starting a new scene. What can I come up with? Maybe you saw something in a gallery. Maybe you saw something in a film. Maybe you had your cereal this morning and they made a shape in your bowl. Like whatever you feel inspired by, you can just bring it into work, open a scene in Unity, and let's play a little bit. Whatever you do, even if it's like a 10-minute experiment or a color palette or a rotator that just rotates your little cereal pieces around in a bowl, whatever you do, you put it in this bank. And we call it, for some reason, we call it the chunk bank, which is disgusting. And then we just couldn't stop calling it that. But this is the chunk bank where everything goes. And then these hard hat people, that's me and the other leads, we look at the chunk bank and then we kind of take them, we see it as a puzzle, and then we put the puzzle pieces together in different shapes until something cool happens. And then on the left side, you can see the puzzle, and then we work with a really talented team who take those puzzle pieces and make them into cool things. But that chunk bank is vital for Monument Valley, and you'll see why soon. And this is a real-life photography of our chunk bank, where you can see every little image there is someone's experiment. Yeah, it says chunk bank. So this is over the course of 3 years or so. Anything we did could end up in this chunk bank. So now let's begin. How are we doing? Half an hour, all right. So yes, let's begin this chapter deconstruction. I've got 3 chapters that I want to look at together. Oh, I forgot I added this meme. I'm so happy I added this because I was worried I was going to forget to say this, but I can't, I know I'm standing here, I can't teach you to make games. I can only tell you what we made. And the reason I want to say that is because I don't believe in rules. Sorry if this is like illegal. But when I entered the games industry, I started making a lot of mistakes, and that is really scary. But you're learning, and it's fine. And then you feel like, okay, I've started learning. Like I made a mistake A, and I realized that I should have done something else. And so you start gathering all of this knowledge, and you feel like next project is going to be so easy because I know exactly what to do. Next time I'm not going to do that thing where I start UI design too late, or we start doing localization a week before launch. Like, you know, all of these things, like I'm not going to do it again. And the thing is that you won't do it again, but those problems are not going to happen again. You will get other problems. It's always going to be new problems every time, and you will never be prepared for what comes your way. So the way that you become a well-seasoned game developer is not by having all the answers. You're never going to have the answers, but you can prepare to not be shaken by the curveballs. And when things happen, you just sit back and you're like, okay, I'll just have to make the best call I can in this situation. And all of the data you have, all of the solutions you have from previous projects, they will sort of form a cloud that makes you like probably slightly better at making a decision. But sometimes you will make the wrong decision still. But the season element means that you won't be shaken by making the wrong decision. You kind of make the wrong decision, and you're like, you know what? That's okay. Deal with it. Yeah, I'm saying that to cover my back, because like this is not a manual. So the first chapter I'm going to talk to you about is called Vayaku. During the development, we called it the Sunken City, and then we realized that there is a chapter in Monument Valley 1 called the Sunken City. That was awkward, and then we had to rename it. And I'm going to talk mostly about this one puzzle here on the screen, which is an incredible optical illusion. It's actually one of the first puzzles we made. during Monument Valley 3, but it was one of the last chapters we made during Monument Valley 3, and I'll explain how. So during the first year of the development of Monument Valley 1, we tried a lot of different things, and we filled this chunk bank, etc., etc., etc. But then we got to a point at some point where we realized that we didn't really have a strong build. We just had a lot of different scenes and experiments. So at some point, the leadership of the company came to us and said, you need to make a vertical slice. We can't just have like a lot of different things that don't cohesively connect. And they were right, of course. And so we decided to take a step back and look at what we have. What do we have in our chunk bank? What are the different experiments? And can we make a vertical slice? So for the vertical slice, we decided to make a chapter. And this is the storyboard I made for our chapter. And we wanted to do three things. We wanted to introduce quite a traditional Monument Valley format in that first like A section. The B section is like, let's like step it up a little bit and do something that hasn't been done before. So like a new mechanic that is new for Monument Valley 3. And then for the third one, C, the abstract bit, is like, let's like just switch it up and go crazy and do something visually different. So it was sort of like traditional design step up and then art step up. And what's the next slide? Okay, yeah. So I think that I actually like, this is the first time I've looked at this storyboard since I made it probably. And I think it's really interesting because it represents a lot of the work that we do for Monument Valley, and actually the way that I like to think about any creative project that I do. And maybe this is actually something that can be like, you know, take this with you. So as a game developer, you are taking the player on a journey. You're taking their hand and you're setting the scene. You're saying like, hey, come and look at this. And when you do that, you're taking them into a world and they will look at what you've done and they will have some expectations. They might be like, oh, okay, there's a chair over there. Maybe I can go and sit on that chair. So what I think our responsibility is, because we have taken them by the hand, is that we have to take them on a journey and we have to meet them at their expectations. But then we also have to surprise them and subvert that. So with most of the chapters that we work on in Monument Valley, there is like a bit of like a setting a scene, and then meeting expectations. Often through playtesting, you can get a sense of what people are expecting and get a sense of what they expect. And then you have to like, you can't just meet their expectation. You have to surprise them. You have to do something more than they expect, because otherwise, if they already expect it, what's the point in playing it? Then you may as well just have shown them a picture, which I'm not opposed to because I'm an artist, but this is a different thing, I guess. Okay, so the sort of optical illusion I showed you, that's the C. So these are three puzzles that we decided to do. We're going to do puzzle A, set the scene, puzzle B, you know, work on the surprise a little bit with the design, and then a whale eats you. And yeah, that's the surprise. The whale eats you, and then you're in the gut of the whale. So that is like you didn't see that coming, and they didn't see it coming actually, and actually it worked so well that that all I heard for the rest of the project was, can we have more of that? You know, the whale eating you, and it became a little bit annoying how people wouldn't let go of that. But it did what we wanted, which was add a surprise. So I was working. This is the sketch on the left, and then I was working with a team on figuring out what is this abstract puzzle that we're working on, and this green image in the middle you might remember from the mood board that I did. The idea really was that like you are in the gut of this whale, is eaten stuff like architecture and you and a bell, And so we can achieve this visual thing that I really wanted to achieve, this like exploding shed. This is an opportunity for me to achieve a visual goal that I have. And we can make this like a floaty puzzle. So on the right, I think Joel, one of our really talented designers, was playing with this toy. You can see how you rotate it and it connects in like this impossible way. But one thing we realized is that we need it to be like a really like on the nose optical illusion. And this is a note, this red note here is something that came up a lot during the development of Monument Valley. It's really hard to make optical illusions. And every once in a while we'd step back and look at what we made and realize that there isn't enough optical illusion. So at some point during the development of this particular puzzle chunk, we decided that it needs to be more of an illusion, more like overtly so. So Joel went back to the drawing board, did a little bit of research, and found this particular shape that he liked the look of, and started developing that a little bit more in Unity. And you can see it on the right, how it's sort of like it's actually crazy that we can do this stuff. And there's a lot of back and forth, and like I've shared a lot of these sort of screenshots. I actually haven't read what it says on any of these post-its, so I hope it says okay things. But this is the sort of like, this is the flow that Joel was imagining for this puzzle. Like it's these floating pieces, they come together and make this crazy shape, and then you're puzzling on this shape. And then on the right, you can see that he's ideating on like, maybe, is my cursor? Yeah, maybe there is like a boat here, or maybe the boat moves here, maybe there's a bell up here, so there's a lot of back and forth. And the same here. And all of this is made in Miro, by the way, best tool that ever happened. And this is not sponsored. So while Joel is doing this sort of white boxing treatment of this puzzle, me and senior artist Holly, who's incredible, were looking at what is the visual treatment. So this is happening in parallel. Joel is doing this, getting all of these like post-it notes and iterating. Holly copies the scene, and like in a separate scene, let's just do art treatments and whatever. Joel will figure out the interactions. We'll just look at the art. And me and Holly were really fond of this idea of maybe like treating it as like the microbes, gut flora of the whale. I was really excited specifically about the one on the right, where the shapes kind of like line up behind the thing and create like a cool composition. So we did a little bit of this. Keep in mind that this is one of the first puzzles we've made for the whole, like ever in the Monument Valley 3 project. It's really early on. So we did that, and people were like, that's weird. And like what? Yeah, people were like, "That's weird," and I'm like fresh Monument Valley art director, like not really like found my feet yet. I'm like, oh shit, people think it's weird. Okay, Holly, like actually, like let's do something more like, okay, less weird, and like maybe it's just underwater instead. So Holly started looking at these like cool, sort of like bottom of the sea, there's like plants growing and stuff. Maybe there's some fish in there, like swallowed fish, the whale, I guess. And also you can see this sort of like organic 2D shapes from my mood boards as well. I had loads of like Matisse cut out plants as well on that mood board. So Holly was really like doing so much justice to that initial research. And in the end, people were like, that's weird. Like, why are the plants growing in the whale, and people, so for the left one, people were like, we don't really get what's happening. Some people would, like half the team would be like, don't really get what's happening, it's weird. And then on the right one, the second half were like, oh, I liked the abstract one. Like this one is weird because it's too literal. And when I said earlier, you know, when you get like curveballs and like you will get problems and you have to like answer questions, but it's never going to be what you did in your last project. These are the sort of things you just have to make a call, to be completely honest. And sometimes there isn't a right answer. And if I had chosen the other one, it would have been a different game maybe. And like every time you make a decision, sometimes you just have to be like, you just have to make a decision because the more you linger. Anyway, so we went on with the plant one. Also, just it's really hard to represent this on slides, but I just wanted to say that the back and forth between art and design is constant. It's like every day, Holly would be like, the silhouette needs to be better. Like you can see how like there's some silhouette suggestions here and stuff, and then Joel would change it, and then Holly would ask for more changes, and then Joel would ask changes of art because it would have broken the design, and then Holly would make some changes, and then the design would break, and then the art would break, and like that happens all the time, and especially early on when you're trying to figure out your work dynamics. So this slide represents that. Anyway, the vertical slice was pulled together. We had this journey of you arriving to this place, going on a boat. It gets stormy, you get eaten by fish, and then you're in this underwater sort of scene with this crazy illusion. And we were really happy with it. And our publishers were really happy with it too. And they really loved that fish. 1 year later, we continued working on the game. I mean, the vertical slice was made in such a vacuum. We didn't really know what we were doing, what was the narrative, what was the story, what's the rest of the content. And what happens is that you just continue working, you make more chapters. At some point, you get closer to the end of the project and you realize that actually there are some chapters that don't really hit the narrative need. There are some chapters at the start which had crazy difficult puzzles, like really like too difficult for that part of the game. And then there's some stuff at the end of the game where the puzzles are not difficult enough. And so what happens is we get big scissors and then we just start cutting things. And what was initially like one chapter, this vertical slice, we cut it in two. And we decided that this one on the left needed a different ending, and this optical illusion on the right it's actually a really hard puzzle, and it needs to go like in a different part of the game, and we just have to do a different beginning for it. So so that happened, and then at that point when we have to find a different beginning, what do? We go back to the chunk bank. And we see what is there, like what can we bring in as a different intro to this puzzle. And this is a long process as well. So this is like the leads being like, maybe we can have these puzzles, or someone else will be like, maybe we can have these puzzles. So you can. This is also in Miro. People just move screenshots around and try and find a shape. Just like this is what Miro is like, really, really great for. You can just move things so quickly. So someone here thought that we could combine these chunks, and someone thought we could combine those chunks, and there's loads of discussion around it. And through that process, we sort of solidify what are the pillars of this chapter. What does this chapter need to fulfill for us to feel like we have done a good job? And we decided that based on this puzzle, it should be a chapter where we use rotation a lot, because then that could be the motif through this experience. It can be a descent, because this feels like the bottom of the sea, so we could have like a sort of like feeling of we're going deeper and deeper. And narratively, we wanted it to be this feeling of visiting a lost city that has been lost to a flood. And so the chunk bank we pulled out this one rotating puzzle that was made in probably week 2 of early ideation by one of the programmers. And then that felt like the perfect sort of rotation thing. And then we were like, we want another puzzle in the middle. We couldn't really find something that was like perfect in the chunk bank. It happens. Sometimes the chunk bank lets us down. And then we're like, we're making a new chunk. It needs to be a rotation one, because it needs to bridge between the first one here, which I love, by the way. It's not really a difficult puzzle. And the last one is a really difficult puzzle. So we need something in the middle that bridges it. And also it needs to visually bridge it, whatever we end up doing. So another thing I pulled out from the chunk bank is these concepts that Fen, one of our artists, did also really early on in the project. This was one of the first experiments when they were still just trying to get into the groove of Monument Valley 3. And I loved this, especially the one on the right, this sort of sunken building in this like dark storm. It just feels so atmospheric. I loved these two so much. Actually, every time we needed to look at something in the chunk bank, I would pull these out. I'd be like, now? Could this be the moment? Is this the moment that we can use these? Like, I absolutely love these ones. And this was the moment. So this is the chapter, Vayaku, where you can see, I think our artist, Zhenya, is the one who did this treatment in the end, where he took Fen's concept, applied it to this one on the left that the programmer did. And it's this incredible rotating structure in the middle of the sea. The puzzle in the middle was a new puzzle made by one of the designers. You can see, again, the sort of curved, rotating architecture. And Zhenya, the artist, did this really clever treatment of entering this structure, slowly going down, and slowly introducing these plants that Holly had added to the last chunk a year previously to that. So just tying it together. So loads of hands were involved in doing this, and I think it turned out really beautiful. So that was that's Vayaku. I'm going to move over to the meadow, which is a different chapter. So the chapter we just looked at, Vayaku, it's like it spun almost the whole project. It was quite balanced in the sense of like, we wanted something visual. We also wanted something. We had design needs. So both disciplines sort of collaborating evenly. The meadow is interesting because this is an example of a chapter that is more visually led. So the visual needs maybe kind of sparked and outweighed the design or puzzling needs. So Holly, who I mentioned earlier, our artist, she had never worked on a Monument Valley before. So when she onboarded onto the project, I think we gave her maybe like a few months of like kind of like just get an engine. These are the tools. Do whatever the hell you want. Like it doesn't matter. Just do stuff. Get comfortable with the tools and experiment. And also I had given her like the mood boards and stuff. So these are some of the things she did early on. And I remember she really like struggled a little bit with this one in particular. But like I loved this one in the middle so much. When I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's incredible. I've never seen anything look like this in Monument Valley. Like, look at it. It's like actually like a ridiculous suggestion that this could be Monument Valley. And I loved that. And it also reminded me of a bunch of stuff in my mood boards that was kind of this bold, flat color, which is kind of unapologetically different from what you've seen in Monument Valley before. So Holly did this as some of her sort of onboarding experiments. And then, that ended up in the chunk bank, this screenshot on the left. It's just chunk bank material. 1 year later, we were ideating on what are we doing for some new chapters. I was like, I want to work on this one. So I took Holly's concept and I did a vibe piece, which is this. It's just like a wheat field, I guess, and like this like little bit of architecture sticking up at the top. I was like, this is a vibe. I want to be I want to be there, and I loved it. I was like, I love this. It's like nothing there, and that rolling eyes emoji. That's the lead designer Emily being like, what's the puzzle here then? So this part of the presentation is like, yeah, showing you that a vibe is enough to make a thing, you know? Vibes first. All the programmers and designers are crying listening to this, but like I really believe in vibes first. If there isn't a vibe, then you'll have to find the vibe later, and like I am like all about vibes first. So what happened is that I was working with the designer, Megan, to try and turn this into a chapter. So similar to the vertical slice, we worked on this storyboard. And also, I forgot to say this when I talked about the storyboard for the vertical slice, but I try to, when I do storyboards, to break it into 3 beats: a beginning, middle, and an end. I think that's all you need really to tell a story, and that's all you really need to for this sort of phase of ideating, because you need to leave enough space to see what happens as well. So this is the journey. You enter this wheat field, and I've said this. These notes are so funny. I think this opening is important, and I still stand by that. So that's the vibe. That's the beginning. You take the player by the hand. You're in a wheat field, and then there's this like lovely moments of like these architectural pieces coming out of the wheat field, and then B, let's add a little surprise there. Narratively, you meet someone who teaches you about nature, so there's like a little bit of a narrative need, and then C is sort of like the outro, where you have learned about nature and you are leaving, and then it says here, is it meaningful to return to the sea? I don't know. Anyway, we went with that. But in here, the sort of, so in the vertical slice, the surprise was at the end when you get eaten by a whale. Here, I kind of like, we figured that let's just put something surprising in the middle instead, and then it's like a mellow exit. Chunk bank. We have a storyboard. Let's go into the chunk bank. So in the chunk bank was the piece by Holly, and then the mood piece. In the middle, the surprise. Like, let's just throw some stuff in. I almost said a bad word. And these. The orange rotating thing was. The artist Fen did that one, and it was also inspired by the exploding shed. And then there's the one there with the crazy colors. Anything that looks like this, by the way, with these colors, a programmer did it. I think it's like the way our shaders, when you don't do anything to it, it looks like that. But our programmer Bullet did this experiment of this cube that explodes. And then at the end, when we were like, okay, you learn about nature, and maybe you bring nature back to this sort of yellow field. There were some experiments about like organic shapes and plants growing and stuff, really deep in the chunk bank that we pulled out. Like here you can see how many hands have been on this material. Like each icon is a different person a contribution to the chunk bank. So when we pull stuff out, it really becomes such like a mixture of people's work. Holly and Megan also worked on this puzzle I think they did this while they were onboarding onto the project. So it is a puzzle that never made it to the game. And they were exploring, one of my mood boards for the project was, I'm not going to talk about architecture at all today, but there were some like ambitions for introducing new architectural styles. So this sort of like West African Hausa style is really beautiful, and Holly worked on implementing that in one of those early explorations. So because I was the artist working with Megan on mocking up this this chapter, and I'm a really lazy artist, so I was like, and Holly did a really good job, so I was like, let's take this from Holly's work, this architectural style. So Megan was working on figuring out the puzzle details. I'm not going to do a lot of nitty-gritty sort of design breakdown today, because that's not the work that I do. But it looks like this when the designers work. We didn't want any like very new mechanics design, like puzzle-wise, because the wheat field was already like a little bit wacky, and we were going to have that sort of like growing flowers in this space. So in terms of puzzle, it is quite traditional. We would say that it's a traditional Monument Valley puzzle. It's just the twist is just the sort of presentation of it. Just too many twists. Kind of, it's just too. When you want the player to feel safe in that they can have an expectation of the space before you subvert that. So if there are too many weird things happening, then they don't know what to expect, and that becomes not a very calm experience. And Monument Valley is quite a meditative thing. So, but for the design and with anything really, the visuals and anything, this is a very simplified, maybe diagram of how we work. So a lot of ideation and research, and then you build something, then you play test it. Is there anything there? Okay, maybe iterate on it. Is it not landing? Okay, back to ideating and researching. And so this is how a lot of this sort of puzzle designs in particular are approached. And building becomes, it's so important to do it early on. Like build something quickly and play test it, because you don't want to get to this part here, the fourth post-it, and have to go back, and then you've spent like a month on something. Like you want to get to this branch as soon as possible. And one of the fresh things about this chapter is that we have this open space that you can navigate, and it's different from traditional Monument Valley where everything is a grid. I'm not going to talk that much about this, but what I will say is that this was a technical nightmare. There is a technical nightmare, and the lead programmer will never forgive me for it, because it was another one of those where there were many opportunities where I could have decided not to do this, and at every point I decided to do it, despite the lead programmer being like, "Are you sure that can we not just like have like one path between A and B, and you can only?" And I'm like, "No, you need to be able to click anywhere, and you can go there." And I remember like 1 week away from submission, there was a bug with this, and I was looking at the scene with the lead programmer, and he was like not happy, and I was like, I can't believe that this is in the game, but I think it's worth it, to be honest. So but so like sometimes you just have to just do it anyway, to be honest. If you have a vision, like it's vibes, like this is vibes, like we need to, this is how I talk to the programmers, and they love it. I don't know. So that's the beginning of that. And then for the palette cleanser, is that the middle part of this storyboard. And I want to introduce you to this sort of idea of like Monument Valley palette cleansers. When we work on the visuals, we don't necessarily require each level to like feed into the next one. Like it can be quite a different thing every time you go to a new chapter or a new chunk or a new puzzle. We sometimes say that Monument Valley is a bit like it's okay if it feels a little bit like a mixtape, where you listen to a song and then you go through a door and it's like a slightly different song, etc. But the experience in Monument Valley 1 and 2 is punctuated by these black background scenes that we call storytellers chunks, and it's often just like a little toy. It's quite quick, and then you meet a ghost character, and they will tell you something quite poetic, and it's quite nice because it feels like a palette cleanser. It like punctuates it. It feels a little bit different, a bit mysterious, and then you go back to. And we use that tool a lot. And in Monument Valley 3, we didn't have this. We didn't have these storyteller moments, but we found other ways to kind of punctuate the experience. So this is another example. So this is a chapter from Monument Valley 2. You can see how it feels quite different. And as a visual tool, it's quite powerful to be able to like just break things up. So the way that we thought we could break things up in this wheat chapter was to do something like a little bit out there, and I really wanted to introduce this exploding shed thing again. So these are some experiments that were in the chunk bank, and then our lead programmer Bullet made this toy, which was also in the chunk bank. And whenever anything in the chunk bank that a programmer makes looks like this, it's so many cubes, and it's like, it's always like it's a program. You can tell a programmer made this basically, and I remember like Bullet showing it to me and being like, maybe we can do like something like this, and I was like. And then, so when I started looking at what could this palette cleanser be, I was working on this one on the left. It looked a little bit like this, just like a Rubik's Cube. And I was trying to build up like this puzzle, being like, what is the moment going to, like, how are we going to make this feel like a cool thing? And then like Bullet was showing me this stuff, and I was like, hold on, like that cube looks a little bit like that cube. So maybe I can combine it. So the ending of this puzzle turns into Bullet's crazy exploding cubes. And it's just really nice, really satisfying, I think, for him to see something combined with a vibes piece, I guess. And just really satisfying for me to be able to like not have to come up with something like that myself. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool, to be honest. And then for the sort of like, so this is where you learn about nature. And then you come out, and Holly was doing a lot of research into sort of like wheat fields, maybe being like not very ecologically friendly, and like what else can we do? Like maybe we can plant some wildflowers. This is from one of our mood boards with like the Statue of Liberty. Like I found this one yesterday. I was like, wow, I'm in New York. And I said, yeah, so I felt like something happened. This was meant to be. And so this is from the chunk bank, just us thinking about like how can we like maybe plant stuff in this space. And so we had this idea that maybe like as you exit this cube, you can like bring nature and like plant wildflowers around you. So just some visual concepts, and then me playing with particle systems on the right. And yeah, so this is the chapter that I've forgotten the name of. We called it Wheat during development, so I don't actually know what it was called in the final product. But you can see the journey of a vibe piece that turned into like a visual journey, and it is still a vibey chapter. There's nothing mechanically very like difficult. There's no like very difficult puzzles in here. It's just mostly about vibes and the sort of like visual moments of the serenity, and then like the explosion, which is like such a surprise, and then walking around in the field in the end and having these sort of like visual treats of the plants. And that's also enough, you know, as an experience. Sometimes it can be led by just what is juicy for your eyes. So for the final chapter that I want to talk to you about, Origata Atelier, is the opposite of what I just shared with you. This is some stuff that was in the chunk bank. Can you guess what discipline made this? These are some programmer toys. Matt Atkins made them. They're incredible. They're based on, I forgot to add a slide about that. He found these toys, they're sort of like physical toys of cubes that I think they're called magic cubes. I don't know, that you can like, you're nodding, so you know them. Yeah, like that. You like this cubes that like they open and close and they're really cool. And we bought those, and we had a chat with a guy who designed them as well. And Matt Atkins was really fascinated by them. So when he onboarded onto the project, this is the kind of toys that he made and filled the chunk bank with. And they are like, some of them like created quite interesting and sophisticated interactions. And you can see as well that they are quite toy-like. You can kind of rotate it, and it's really satisfying. And we always look for stuff like that. From the get-go, I was really scared about these things because Monument Valley is about silhouette, it's about architecture. And this is a breakdown that Ian, one of the artists, did to show like the sort of stuff we aim for within the art team. We look for symmetry, silhouette, blocks. And here's some examples actually of two puzzles where you can see what the white box looks like, which is what the designers provide the artists. And then through iterations back and forth, it turns into architecture. And so how are we going to turn this into something Monument Valley appropriate? So this is me rolling my eyes at the end. It's like, where's the vibe? Like, how are we going to do that? And I really was scared of this content. And I feel like Emily, the lead designer, was like, I think sometimes in between chapters, or sometimes like resources, people become a little bit more available. And I feel like I have this memory of her saying like, yeah, but Holly doesn't have that much to do. Like maybe you can just like try some stuff. And I was like, okay, let's just try it. And also Holly had expressed for a while that she wanted to own a chapter. She had been doing a lot of support of chapters or doing like one chunk out of like 4 chunks. So she was like, I feel ready to like take on a chapter myself and do something cool. And Emily was like, please, can we just like try to make this? I was like, okay, Holly, how do you feel about taking this one on? But I was like, but don't feel bad if it doesn't work. So Holly started working with Megan, and these are all white box, I believe. So Megan probably had been told by Emily that Lily is worried about this, and it needs to be architectural. So this is Megan, the designer, being like, okay, I'm going to work on these puzzle ideas, but I'm going to try and also suggest that maybe it can be a building of some sort. Which I think is really cool, and I think it's really great when designers think about the visual result. It helps a lot. So Megan was doing this sort of stuff, and then Holly was doing the biz dev, and she did a lot of experiments and did a lot of wide experiments. So some architectural stuff, and then some like wackier stuff. And the one in the middle like felt really cool. I was like, it's like a blueprint sort of thing, like, you know, maybe like more like a diagram. There's one thing that we really try to avoid in Monument Valley, which is we try to avoid paths that are just 1 cube wide, because it's like with chunky fingers, it's really hard to tap on them on your phone. But also when you try to give something visual priority, if it's small, it's really hard to be like, oh, you have to go to this one little cube. And like you can see that like most of this is just like a single cube everywhere. So if you add something like a tower next to it, it's going to take so much away from that 1 cube, and then you don't like, it's hard to with the visual hierarchy. So the fact that in the middle here, Holly kind of like removed everything, and it was just about those cubes. It kind of gave that space, and it made it less visually confusing. So she went down this path of this sort of more like diagrammatic, print look. And it looked really cool, to be honest. I feel like I looked away and then I looked back. I was like, wow, you made something really cool with this really scary thing. So this is the journey, really. So on the left, you can see what was in the chunk bank, and then how the designer was like, okay, let's try and make it architectural. And then Holly was like, okay, let's do something completely else. Tried some different things. Actually, maybe this blueprint kind of diagram look might work. And it did. So this is Origata Atelier, which is sort of like a pencil sketch print look. where we're really just focusing on the paths and the simplicity of those shapes. And we've Holly stripped everything else away because it was really hard to balance that against what was there. And in between, so this sort of like the second and the fourth image are the sort of transitions between the puzzles, where there's just like animations and cool audio. And like you can see, those things are you can see them drawn and sketched out in real time as you transition from one puzzle to the next. And it's one of our all-time fan favorites for Monument Valley 3. People really love this one. And yeah, it's an example of me being wrong, because I was like, this is not going to work out. It's not going to work out. And really, a really great artist saved it. So that's the 3 chapters. I've gone horribly over time, I've just realized, but these are the 3 chapters I wanted to share with you today. If there's something I want you to take from this, it's that try to surprise the player, take them on a journey where you can bring something new, surprise them with something, but also as a game developer, I guess, as you are working on things, be open to the process surprising you as well. Like, you will have curveballs, you will have surprises, you won't really know what comes your way, and that is sort of part of the process as well. So be open to being surprised as you find ways to surprise your audience. So, thank you.
Tradition. Lili and I are going to dialogue a little bit, and then we'll be opening it up to questions as well from interactive all of you. So thanks. Okay. Hello, hello. Hello. Hello, hello. Okay.
Hello.
Yes. Lili, thank you so much. Wow, I feel like...
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again. Yeah, wow. Amazing. First of all, thank you for, going into such detail, being so generous, and sharing all of that. I feel like what we just experienced was exactly like one of those animations when like something rotates and something that you thought was sort of small kind of opens up and explodes, and suddenly you're seeing it from other angles. And I just feel like basically that's what you did with your whole process and the game, right? So we Monument Valley is like the metaphor for what you just did to Monument Valley. So yeah, thank you so much for that. I think what's so interesting is that when you have something like Monument Valley, that's a puzzle game that's so refined in terms of its graphic design, its interaction design, and its puzzle design, you look at the final result and you think it's just so perfect and seamless. It's like watching a ballet dancer, just sort of like these simple, elegant movements. But I think what you've done today is you've helped us realize, like, it's, and so one thinks like, oh, someone just had the idea and sketched it out and then it was implemented, right? And I think that you've helped us appreciate the incredible, like, messy, exploratory, collaborative, non-linear, stumbling around, and sometimes with intention, sometimes without intention, process that then leads to that, right? That what you don't see when you watch the ballet dancer is like all the work, all the training, all the rehearsals, all the jumps that didn't make it, all the choreography that was forgotten and then redesigned, and you know what I mean, all of the practice and rehearsal and iteration.
No, it is so true. And actually, when I started doing the breakdown, you know how the storyboards are sort of like beginning, middle, end, and the final result is, so as you said, Monument Valley has this quite polished persona. But actually, when I started breaking things down, I realized how incredibly messy it was. And there was a moment actually during the process of making these slides where I was like, oh no, like I don't I don't know how to share this without it coming across as like a complete train wreck, because there is such a lack of structure to this process, and each chapter is made so different from the next chapter. And then I realized that it is really just the way that it is done, like to create something so polished where around every corner there's a new surprise. The process is really quite messy.
And it was so interesting for you to go into that process. I feel like one of my ways I think about software development and game development is that, I don't know if you've ever seen the Popeye cartoon, the American cartoon, you know, Popeye, the sailor man, right? So he, sometimes in his cartoon, he'll like, to show he'll like punch a tree, and the tree flies up as lumber. And it's like a whole bunch of lumber just like floating in the air, and then it lands as like a log cabin, a perfect house, right? So to me, like, software development is often like that. And when you showed us that giant, like it's like, there's no way all of this is going to end up, somehow it falls together by the end, right? And showing us that big chunk bank, on all of those pieces and all those little bits, and it felt like that, like all of these kind of exploded pieces. And I think what's so interesting is how much work that chunk bank does, that process does, right? Like you mentioned some of the things. For example, it creates kind of an automatic kind of collaboration, interdisciplinary, I think what's so interesting is there's an open-ended kind of exploration process, right? You say, like, people are just kind of adding, and then other things then might be leftovers from levels that were like, so then things get kind of re-put back in, right? And so there's this interesting recycling process that happens with the chunk bank. And I guess I'm just really curious to ask you maybe a little bit more about, I guess each of the levels that you showed are kind of like, those parts can come together in different ways and through different processes. You mentioned at the beginning that a lot of what your learning was, as you got more experience, was about not making mistakes. Do you feel like, since you were showing us kind of successful levels, what do you even consider a mistake? Like in the midst of this process, this kind of thick collaborative process?
I think with these sort of projects, one thing I have to remind myself of is that whatever we put in front of the player at the end of the day, they will accept as our intention. They won't know what we aimed for, or what we cut, or what changed, or what disappointed me, or what. Like, they won't know any of that. They won't know that I didn't believe that that level could become a real thing, or that this one was a Frankenstein, creation from, like. So whatever you put in front of people is going to be what they accept. So when I talk about mistakes, it sort of isn't so much about mistakes in the final product, but maybe mistakes with learnings that I have along the way, in terms of maybe the decisions I make, or how I make those decisions, or when I make those decisions, or how I think that's the sort of things more than anything. So maybe I regret being a little bit difficult with accepting this as an idea. Maybe I
the wheat field, you mean, that became such a technical problem?
The sort of like Origata Atelier one, where, like, this sort of like really like detailed puzzles where I'm like, I was pushing back on it so much for such a long period of time, and I feel like I should have just sort of like, but in the end it doesn't really matter. Like, you just make decisions and you adjust as you go, and I would say that I try not to see any of it as mistakes, but more like just the journey of arriving at whatever it is we arrive at in the end.
Let me take a few steps back. I want to think about when you were first arriving at Us2, and you were coming on for the third in a really well-known, successful series. What is that like? And at that point, Monument Valley had already, was appearing in popular culture media, was sort of like incredibly well known in the you know, in sort of culture at large in terms of people that are playing video games and people who didn't even play video games. I think, what was it, like House of Cards?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like Monument Valley makes an appearance there.
Absolutely. Actually, I have a lot of friends who the only game they've ever played has been Monument Valley.
Right.
Like, they don't play games, but they played Monument Valley.
So how are you, that must have been an intimidating kind of...
It was intimidating. And actually, the story I had about this one on the left, where it was really hard to strike a balance of like how abstract to go with the visuals or how more like grounded to go with the visuals. This was really one of the first puzzles that I worked on, and I really struggled with that, like hearing people's opinions and expectations and trying to navigate it, and like getting this feeling that I want everyone to be happy with what I bring to this epic series. But what like the early... Trying to find my feet early on was really tough because there was a lot of conflicting opinions from people, and you think that you enter a process and that the challenge will be, you know, I'm just going to be taking feedback and adjusting based on feedback. What you don't realize is that everyone will have different feedback, and it's going to they're going to contradict each other, and they're going to be all sure that they are right, and then you're going to be in the middle, and you have like Monument Valley 3, and you're trying to make something good, and it's really hard, especially with Monument Valley, where we had people in the studio who had worked on the first and second Monument Valley. We had audience members, like play testers, people online writing comments, new team members who had their expectations, my own expectations. And similar to how, like, I was talking about when someone plays the game you make, you have to take them on a journey. You have to sort of treat the game development the same. Everyone's in this boat. We don't know where we're going, but you want to please everyone.
Right. And game fans are notoriously hard to please, right? Because there's really no pleasing them sometimes, that they kind of want more of the same. They just want their good old comfort food. But then if you're not giving them something new and surprising and innovative, you know, they're going to complain about that. Exactly. But it seems to me that part of your strategy was this kind of research process that you talked about, right? Like that becomes a way to drive kind of a wedge into this calcified block of the existing Monument Valley and just bring some fresh air into it, right? So when you're showing us your visual references, was that kind of research going on in other departments too? Were the game designers also trying to research new approaches to puzzle design and gameplay?
Yeah, they absolutely were. Both for like puzzle designs, but also like optical illusions, what sort of approaches they can, and even like, you know, the programmers, the guy who was doing the magical cubes, that was also part of the research process, looking at toys, looking at different like media. And so absolutely. And the sort of the decisions you make early on about what to look at really shapes a lot of the process further down. So at the beginning, when I made those mood boards are really from the beginning of the project, and it might have felt like a little bit throwaway or like a little bit of like a sort of like fumbling in the dark, sort of maybe we can do something like this, but it shaped a lot of the stuff that you've seen today in terms of the organic shapes and the flat 2D colors. And that's something I have learned as well, is that you can set some goals early on, and the team really will look towards that research that you do. But also, these things are things that I decided to look at. I wanted to look at these references and the organic shapes and the Matisse plants and the exploding sheds, and that just happened to be the one exhibition I went to with so in terms of making a stand and making decisions, I could have gone to a different exhibition and found a different reference, and the project could have gone in a completely different direction, and that would have probably also been fine. So when I talk about like making mistakes, or like, I don't think there is really sometimes a mistake. It's just bring stuff to the table and see what sticks.
But I think that what's so interesting about those mood boards is that sometimes one sees a mood board and you feel like the artist or designer is kind of trying to confirm what they already know. And I feel like the mood boards that you showed us were like doing such work to open up new spaces, and I don't know, there's a kind of muscular labor that they end up doing to really push the project forward in a way. You know, like they do more than just establish a vibe or a mood, that they really become source resources, that are then used in multiple ways throughout the project, to suggest color palettes, to suggest visual aesthetics, but also to suggest how, which I think is like the magic of your whole talk, how the game design and the art direction work together.
Yeah, and I think that when you're early on in the project, really being open to what surprises, like, when I put those references together, like I didn't have a goal in my head of what I thought was going to come out of it, but I had this idea of a vibe and like this conflict, this visual conflict that needed to be represented, the city versus nature. So I was looking at finding a conflict and a language for a conflict, because that's what narratively I knew was needed. So it wasn't sort of like I wasn't aiming for something. I had a requirement and I tried to solve it with my research. And then that would then be a platform to then figure out where we're going from then. I've got A, I've got B, so let's see where we go. And luckily we ended up somewhere. But I think that's why it's so important to not to research widely, to see what sort of visuals can solve your brief, but also to look outside of games and not aim for something that you like.
Right.
Don't aim for something that you like. Just try to find puzzle pieces and see where that path takes you.
I think so much that a game or any creative work is the residue of its process, right? It's sort of like what happens at the end of a process. You're sort of left with this thing, and that's why I think this is, again, why I enjoyed your talk so much. There's so many little lessons like that from your process and ways of thinking about research. I think I want to ask you about maybe one more topic, and then we'll switch to Q&A from the audience. I thought in terms of thinking about structures, right? We've been talking about process, but a little bit of what you were saying about the way the beginning, middle, and end, the set the scene, meet expectations, and then subvert them. It makes me think of, I think, is it the comedians that talk about the rule of three? Is that right? They say like one time establishes, the second time is the repetition, and then the third time is the punchline where something unexpected happens, right? So it is a kind of wonderful shorthand for thinking about the paradox that we're in as game designers, right? Because we want to teach expertise to our players. We want them to learn and use what we're teaching them. But if a level or sequence of levels, these chapters, isn't also surprising and delighting through breaking a rule, right? So we're simultaneously, we have to teach them rules, but then we have to lead them through experiences where those rules are broken in ways which then leads them to see the whole system in a new light, right? So I think that's a lovely shorthand that kind of encapsulates that whole process. And there's sort of an aesthetic theory, in a sense, right, behind that, a kind of structural template for thinking about level design.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I mean, yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. I just don't really agree with that. But I think when we were doing playtests, it was really those moments, like with this like cube that opened, like when we would watch playtests and the sort of reactions of someone opening that and being like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, you can only get that if you've like lulled them into like a false sense of like, oh, you think you know what's going on? Well, look at this. But that groundwork really needs to happen for you to be able to give that surprising moment.
Maybe we should head to audience questions. I'm sure that some of you have some things that maybe you'd like to ask Lili. Logan, I think we're gonna have folks come over here and line up by the mic. So please, come on over, and we can, if others want to also line up behind, you can just come right over here. Because we're recording and streaming, so that's why we need the mic.
Hi, just thank you so much for that talk. I feel like I learned so much about the creative process just now. I was wondering how, like, given that you guys have such a complex creative process, how long generally does it take to like create like a level or then a chapter? And then I guess like with playtesting, how does that like come in? Like, are they like public volunteers or are they like just part of your studio? I was wondering if you could talk more about the process.
I'll answer the easy part, which is the playtesting. Is different. So not everyone in the studio works on Monument Valley 3. So we have people in the studio who are fresh eyes occasionally. We work in a building with other offices. Sometimes we like ask them to come and play, but then we also work with like services that will provide us with playtesters. So I think Playtest Cloud and like some other services we worked with in the past, where we get like, I was about to say official people, but like, you know, people who are like, I guess, work within this format. So it's a little bit of everything, to be honest. Like early on, we will just work within people in the studio and then branch out. And then sometimes we'll do friends and family. It's like wherever we can get, really. Like, obviously, using something like Playtest Cloud is a paid service. So at that point, we need to make sure that we really are confident that we're going to get good data. And then the other question about how long it takes, that really is like how long is a piece of string, because some things will be so quick and some things will be. That's the shocking thing about game development, is that it's seen as this sort of like recreational entertainment thing. But like a lot of game development is like new tech. Everything you do is like new tech if you want to do something new. And like, it takes so long to understand what it is you're doing and then building it and then testing it and trying to find an optical illusion and then trying to like, okay, we need a new, so with this sort of like wheat field where we didn't have the tech for that, all of a sudden, like I need to ask a programmer to build something that we don't have. So it just depends on what comes out of the exploration. So some chapters will be really quick. Maybe like everything in the chunk bank is almost done and we just need to like change the colors a bit. And some things are really hard where we realize that we need some more difficulty at the end. So we need difficult puzzles, and then we're just like, please make difficult puzzles, designers, or like we need like a crazy optical illusion that blows everyone's mind. Can you please do that? And like sometimes like, so it depends on what the requirement is. So I actually can't, like, it's completely different for every chapter.
Hi, I also love Miro. It kind of feels like that it allows you to spontaneously capture things that like a Word doc is not freeform enough, and unlike a whiteboard, it actually allows you to capture things. So I'm curious what a workflow with like Miro in mind looks like for you guys. Like, what type of document is moved from a traditional doc to can be a mural board? How does a different part of the team cooperate together? And do you guys keep a record of different versions of your mural board? Like, is there a version control you have to abide by? I'm really curious.
Yeah, so we started, this project is my first Miro project, and we started like during the pandemic, I guess. And I don't actually know if we had the best system for it, because we have so many Miro boards, and like sometimes you want to find the one image that was posted in a Miro board 3 years ago, and every month we make 2 new Miro boards. So I don't really know if I can give any advice on how to use Miro. Apart from that, we love it. Despite all of that, it's like the best tool we've ever used. So we made a new one every sprint. Every sprint is 2 weeks. And sometimes every sprint, like the designers would make their own sprint Miro board, and the artists would make their own, and then I would make my own Lili sprint Miro. Like, so you could imagine like the amount of boards we had. So yeah, I have no advice really on this one. I'm so sorry, but I have all the encouragement to keep using it because it is so good for collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you so much for your lecture. I wanted to ask specifically about your process and the team collaboration. It strikes me as something that's incredibly intertwined and intimate between, art and gameplay. It's kind of like a never-ending puzzle, or like an Ouroboros sort of eating its own tail. And I'm wondering if it strikes me as like beautiful chaos. It's incredibly chaotic, and I'm wondering if. Do you feel like there's a way to scale this process to a bigger team? Because I imagine your team is like a team of like sub 10 maybe, something like that. And when studios grow, they come 20 or 30, and after that becomes nearly 100. And I'm wondering if you feel like there is a way to translate that efficiently and cleanly from 10 to 100. Do you feel like you have to scale back on the chaos? Do you need to give it different rules, or even like strip away from restricting chaos and having more order?
I really like your diagram of like the snake eating its own tail. That is
every metaphor becomes like another Monument Valley level in my mind now.
It is, and it's really true. But I would say for Monument Valley in particular, more than anything I've ever worked on, it is that snake, because the back and forth is constant, really, and it really is the case of like sending it to the designers. They broke the art, then the artist broke the design, and like back and forth until.
How large was the development team?
So the development team was, I think I had about maybe 7 artists, maybe about 7 per discipline, something like that. So in the end, we were probably between 20 and 30 on the team. But
it also seems like from your descriptions that they were sort of subsets working on chapters or working on aspects of the game. So they sort of were able to preserve this smaller group collaboration.
Yeah, so we tried to pair things up, like a designer, an artist, and a programmer, and they would work on a chapter. So each chapter would have like one of each discipline, ideally working together. I would say that the bigger the team got, at some point we would have maybe like 4 or 5 tracks, so 4 or 5 different chapters like happening at the same time. And at that point, you really want people to really own their work as much as possible and be confident and comfortable with the being able to make decisions and make suggestions. So maybe early on we would pair people up. Maybe it's like 2 or 3 artists on one chapter, and then it's like 2 artists on one chapter, and then it's like 1 artist on one chapter, and then you end up having so many different tracks happening. So that's the way that we found that we could scale things, is to pair people up until we felt like they could make decisions on their own.
I guess the question is about whether, if you're scaling up to an industrial size team with hundreds of people, making all the 3D visual assets for levels and things like that. Does it scale? Does that kind of collaboration scale?
I would not want to be the person to solve that, is what I'm going to say, especially for Monument Valley. I would be sad if I was asked to think about that. I don't know how that would work, to be completely honest.
No worries. I liked your explanation about on your scale on how you guys did things, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, I have a more specific question regarding the arts, which is especially for like the color choices for level 3, because we've seen inspirations from like nature versus structure from the ocean, from the metal. Is it or the field, right?
Yeah.
How did the team or like the artist land on the final color choices for level 3, which is such a minimal like design? I just wondering like what is the back process for this?
For all of it, or for specifically?
For the level 3.
For level 3. So I think that, so I wasn't the artist to develop this in particular, but from my memory, thinking about it, I think it was led by this discovery that Holly had about more of like a blueprint kind of treatment. So with the blueprint in mind, actually, like for a while it had like a grid background as well, just like a blueprint, but it was a case of just stripping back to allow the complexity of those like little pieces opening and closing to shine in their own right. And I guess it was just simplifying, basically. So the background art being this parchment to give this paper feeling, and then those colors. Holly looked at a lot of sort of like risograph prints and gradients. And there were definitely iterations that were less colorful or more like just all blue to give a blueprint feel. So at some point she did the shift, and I'm going to take a guess and Holly can comment. I don't know how this works, but I'm going to take a guess to say that it was just trying different things and seeing how people responded to it. And I remember actually this screenshot that I chose for this, it was the first screenshot out of all of her mock-ups that I was like, this is the one. This looks incredible. I love the pink to blue. It looks incredible. And so that kind of anchored the color exploration for the full chapter.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Hi, good evening. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about the team collaboration process, especially regarding Unity. It seemed like throughout your talk, you had mentioned people being inside of the editor at various points in time, and especially during the onboarding process. So I'm kind of just curious to hear you talk more about how that fits into, how the team works.
Okay. So firstly, everyone works in Engine. Everyone's hands-on in Unity and completely 100% fluent in the editor and with the tools. We have our tech director, Manish, is very keen to make sure that our tools are artist-friendly, which is like, it sounds a little bit like he's saying that was stupid, but but he actually he really encourages.
I call the friendly rivalry between departments.
No, but I love him. But he loves making tools specifically for artists. So a lot of the tools we have are really visual, and there's like UI in the editor and for our tools to make it very easy to work with. So everyone is in editor. Every scene is a different scene, self-contained, and I don't know if I'm answering the question at all about it, but it is a lot of sending the scene back and forth. It's a lot of duplicating the scene. So duplicating, I don't even know if it makes sense to duplicate a scene because we have source control, so you should be able to just roll back. But there's something in the feeling of oh, I have the old version, I'll just make a new version. So the artists do that a lot, and the designers do that a lot. And it helps because then you can play an old version of the puzzle, or you can look at an old version of the art. But it is just, there isn't more structure than that, to be honest. It's just locking scenes, sending them back and forth, duplicating it to make an art pass while the designer is still working on the
But you're also sometimes working in Photoshop, right? Or drawing, right? Or a lot of the mock-ups that you showed us are really just in editor mock-ups.
Every artist, and I can only speak for the artist, but every artist works completely differently, and I don't put any, some people work on paper, some people work in Procreate on the iPad, some people are in
Just saying, some of the visual mock-ups that you showed us precede the editor.
Some of them, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, but I would say I am personally notoriously bad at, I go straight in Engine.
Ah, okay.
Interesting. Everything can be beautiful cubes to me. So it just depends on the person. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up. So is that fluency in Unity, is that expected sort of before you start working with the team, or is that something that you are expected to develop in the process of working?
It's different. I mean, our unique tools for Monument Valley, obviously, wouldn't expect anyone to have learned. But actually, I had never used Unity when I started working at Us2 Games, which I'm not sure I was very honest about when I interviewed.
Wow.
But
we'll edit this part out of the video.
But yeah, edit this out. But I had never used it very much, and I just learned on the job. And a lot of people at Us2 Games just learn Unity on that. It's not hard. It's not a difficult tool to learn. Within a month, if you're in there every day, and especially if you have team members who can help you, it's not hard to learn these things. I would never hesitate to hire someone because they don't know a tool. It doesn't matter.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I'm curious about the chunk bank. What goes in there? Because you were mentioning if someone sees something in their cereal bowl that might be inspiring, but it feels like that would very quickly get overrun.
No, but anything, everything, like literally everything and anything can go in the chunk. Like I would say that it might not be very well maintained. So if you don't like actively put your own chunks in the chunk bank, maybe some of that, like it definitely isn't like 100% accurate representation. There's more than was in that screenshot. But whatever someone remembers to put in the chunk bank goes in the chunk bank. There's probably stuff in there that is essentially just like a screenshot.
Well, it looked pretty well organized. I mean, I know there was a lot in there, but they were kind of sorted through categories,
No,
right?
yeah, definitely. It is sorted through categories, but I would say like some things were probably missed because it was never added, you know. So, but there is no real minimum requirement for what goes in there. Like it's just whatever you want to add could go in there. Yeah.
And is there any sort of like team meeting where people get together, look through the chunk bank, or just is just individually people go?
So yeah, I believe that the design discipline would have chunk bank reviews. So I do think that they would highlight and sometimes do like we do this thing like a call board kind of exercise where like maybe people would like pull out like maybe we're like we need some new chapters. Maybe the designers would pull out the cool stuff from the chunk bank that they liked, and then that would be brought into like the leads meeting, and then we would look at it, and maybe I would say these ones look scary from an art point of view, and and that's what probably I said about that one. But so the designers would manage it.
And do you have people in your team, because you've mentioned visual designers, game designers, and programmers? Are there also process people that are their main job is to act as a producer?
Yeah,
or
we
project
have a
manage?
full-time producer as well.
One.
2, I think we had.
Wow. Okay, so actually quite a small number.
Yeah. It is.
Which means, I mean, relative to the other disciplines, which means that there's a lot of onus on the artists, designers, and programmers to carry that process forward, to organize the chunk bank, to respond in a timely way, etc.
I would say that the discipline leads, do a lot of that as well.
I see.
Yeah, so I would do the planning for my discipline, and I would be supported by the producers.
Right. So when you talked about Holly, for example, finally getting to sort of own a whole chapter, it's because she is, like you, sort of supporting other people and managing or putting bits into other.
So she would express it to me as her lead that like I want to do that, and then when I do the planning with the producers and with the other leads, I would be like, okay, for the next sprint, I just want to say that I want Holly to take on this thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe Logan, how are we on time?
We're a little over. I would say like 1 minute for each question.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. We'll try and keep it tight.
Okay, so I'll try to keep it short, but thank you so much for the talk. And the question is a little bit more general, and you can decide how to approach it. But it's basically when every level needs its own identity, and it's such an iterative process. How do you like keep yourself and your team fresh and creative all the time?
It's a good question. And at the beginning, for the art, I can only speak for the art, but at the beginning, it's sort of like free for all. Just do whatever you want. At some point, we have to take a step back, and we have this one mirror board, actually, that art overview mirror board, where we keep screenshots of stuff, and we try to keep track of like, this is what the game looks like right now. So there will be a point where we as an art team look at it and we're like, everything is blue. That like we need to do other things, basically. So at some point, the direction for me becomes we need to diversify our screenshots and maybe look for gaps, and those gaps become the brief.
Great. Thank you.
Take us home.
Thank you for the talk. So like, your work just seems like very like magnum opus, like in that like you're really just like approaching like this theory of like work. Is there a game that you would like to like? Is there like a dream game that you'd like to make, or actually games that you like the experience of that possibly are adjacent to something that you would like to make with your art?
I'm gonna be really honest and really boring and say like, no, I don't have that. Because the thing is that like I love the surprise of not knowing where I end up. with that project. So to me, the joy is really like, who are the leads group? What, like, let's throw some ideas on the paper. Like, what are we gonna do? Who are the team members? Where are we gonna end up? And like, you never know. And like, I find that if I have an idea of what I want to make or where I want to do, like, I will be disappointed. Like, I'm just in it. I'm just here for the ride. Like, that's how I really feel about it. And like, as I go, just figuring out what are people's strengths around me. What are my strengths? What's my weaknesses? I have a lot of weaknesses, and then I hire people to like fill those weaknesses, and then just like see where we end up, really. And yeah, maybe like I have had the pleasure of working on a lot of with a lot of really great teams, and on a lot of projects that the teams have made look beautiful. And what I've really learned is the biggest joy is like finding good collaboration and finding people who you can solve problems with and who can surprise you with like solving problems you could never have solved yourself. And what I really want is just to continue doing that. And that's all I encourage.
Definitely, it makes sense just because like this seems like a poetic byproduct of the company and of the people. Like you guys are the environment. You guys are this. So that's pretty.
Thank you so much for that question. And Lily, I loved your answer. I'm just here for the ride. I think I will make you a t-shirt that says that on there. I think Logan is going to finish up with a couple questions from our online.
Yeah, two very quick questions from Twitch chat. First question, how much time transpired between the first chunk in the chunk bank and the final product?
Probably 3 to 4 years. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And the final question is, do you ever dream about the levels?
Oh God, it's hard to describe how much this has ruined my life. I should have put it here. I walked to Chinatown yesterday, and I saw this building. And I took so many photos of this building. I will send it to you and you can share it.
I will.
But it was almost a perfect Penrose. And I was like a crazy woman, like just trying to get the perfect photo of this building. I cannot believe that I found a building that almost was a Penrose in real life. I can't believe it. But this is basically, yeah, I dream it. I see it everywhere, wherever I go. And sometimes I see a rooftop and I'm like, I think I can add that to the game. But that Penrose yesterday is like, it blew my mind. It was somewhere in the Chinatown area. So yeah, I see it everywhere, whatever I do. And also, where was it I was? It was actually at the, humble brag, I was at the BAFTA headquarters. And the floors was almost like an optical illusion. Like, yes, as you can tell, like I just see it everywhere. Just I see everything. It's like the Matrix, but less cool.
All right, well, clearly Monument Valley has left its mark on your psyche, but I feel like you've left your mark on ours. So please join me in thanking Lili Ibrahim for an amazing, amazing talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, spectacular. It's really an honor to have you here at the Game Center, and you're always welcome to come back and
thank you so much.
Do more. So that's it. Thanks, everybody. And Lili, thank you again. Thanks, Lili. Thanks, Game Center. Thanks, everybody, for coming out.